Greetings, friends, fellow citizens, fellow patriots, and even non-citizens from around the world and around the country. Welcome to this week's edition of the We the People Convention News and Opinion Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the generous donors of the We the People Convention who pay for this podcast, for our website, for our text messages, our emails, our social media, our donations to other important conservative groups, and we thank them for your support over the last 16 years. My name is Tom Zawistowski. I'm the host of this podcast. I'm also the president of the We the People Convention organization, and I welcome you to this version of the podcast, and particularly if you're new to us. You will, I think you'll get a lot more out of this podcast than maybe any other podcast you possibly can watch that's available on the major streaming platforms today. It is January 24th, and when I got up this morning, the temperature was zero, the air temperature was zero, and the wind chill was minus 14. You can see the flag in the background. I don't think you're going to see it waving because I think it's frozen in that position, and so it's cold. And as we open today's podcast, we are thinking about our fellow Americans as this monster storm moves literally from Texas all the way up into New England over the next couple days. Fortunately for us here in Northeast Ohio, our temperatures are going to go up from this point. It got below zero overnight, but by this afternoon it'll be 14, 15 degrees. Not exactly a heat wave, but certainly much preferred over where we are. And then on Sunday, we're going to get hit with snow, but none of this freezing rain stuff that is so concerning. So, I'm reminding all of you, be sure to take care of each other. Call your family, friends, and relatives who live in areas that will be affected. Be prepared yourself. Have things ready. Have a plan. What happens if you lose power? Whose house could you go to, who would be out of that area? Do you have enough food and water in case, the power outages affects things like the grocery stores? Do you have gas in your tank because there's a power outage, you won't be able to get, gas, won't be able to pump at the gas stations? Just do what Americans always do. Take care of each other and pray. Pray that God, takes care of the most vulnerable, and pray that God protects our police officers, our firefighters, the FEMA workers, the utility workers who are going to be trying to put the power back on in wide swaths of our country, starting, today, Saturday, January 24th, and going all the way to who knows how long. So our hearts, our minds, our thoughts, our prayers, everything are with our fellow Americans. As many as 230 million Americans, like 2/3 of our population, are going to be affected in some way by this storm. So say a prayer and then act to help others and to protect yourself, okay? We sure appreciate you tuning in. We're going to do our best to give you, the facts of what happened this week and to put those in perspective, and then to give you some direction on what you can do if you're new to this podcast. What our goal is to protect and defend our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. That's what we're about. And so the stories that will be in this podcast from this week are about things that affect you and your family and your community. And then we will suggest some things for you to do to help, make things better in the week ahead. All right. So let's get into it. Thank you for joining us. The story of the week really was that Donald Trump went to Davos and basically owned the elites. That's just the only way to put it. He didn't come to kowtow to them. He didn't come to try to gain their favor. He came there to tell them like it is, and it was pretty brutal. Let me just read a little bit, and then I'll play a clip that kind of sets the tone. European leaders worked themselves up into a full-blown hysteria before President Trump spoke at the World Economic Forum this week with wild claims that Trump planned a U.S. invasion of Greenland that would destroy the NATO alliance and the rules-based international order. A couple of dozen European troops were hurriedly sent to Greenland. French President Macron called for an emergency G7 summit. European leaders also discussed implementing a bazooka trade retaliation against the United States. But when Trump spoke at the Davos summit on Wednesday, these hair-on-fire claims melted away in the face of his masterful speech. And I will probably put his full speech up in our video section at wethepeopleconvention.org here after today's podcast. His speech laid out in depth his successful record of promoting global security and ending wars. The president also turned the tables on European leaders by challenging them over policies that have endangered their security and the welfare of their citizens. Very much in your face, and I'm going to play two clips that kind of make that point. Trump mocked Europe's reliance on windmills and green energy, noting that electricity prices have soared by 139% in some European countries, and criticized the UK for energy policies that make it impossible to drill for oil in the North Sea, their greatest asset that they just took off the table because they're stupid. He actually called them stupid this week. Trump also contrasted Europe's poor economic performance with the U.S. economic miracle and said European leaders should end the radical policies that are dragging down their economies and emulate American policies. Well, he's right about that. I mean, that's the bottom line. The radical Marxist left, funded by the communist Chinese, was destroying the West by promoting these elitist, college-indoctrinated fools into destroying their own countries. And that's what they've been doing. That's what Biden and Obama were doing here until you and I rose up and stopped them by electing Donald Trump to be president against all odds just over a year ago. So here's a clip from Trump that you will enjoy, that the people at the World Economic Forum probably didn't enjoy. Here you go.
The United States cares greatly about the people of Europe. We really do. I mean, look, I am derived from Europe. Scotland and Germany, 100% Scotland, my mother, 100% German, my father. And we believe deeply in the bonds we share with Europe as a civilization. I want to see it do great. That's why issues like energy, trade, immigration, and economic growth must be central concerns to anyone who wants to see a strong and united West, because Europe and those countries have to do their thing. They have to get out of the culture that they've created over the last 10 years. It's horrible what they're doing to themselves. They're destroying themselves. It's beautiful, beautiful places. We want strong allies, not seriously weakened ones. We want Europe to be strong.
So that was his theme, that we've been paying for everything forever, and what are you doing for us? And Europe's economy is almost combined is almost as big as ours, and yet they don't pay for the defense because they let you and I, the American taxpayer, pay for it. And Trump is saying those days are over, and that's where this Greenland issue came up, because what he's basically saying is that you guys want to fight Russia and you want to keep having these wars. And if it escalates, it could go nuclear. If it goes nuclear, you know what the U.S.'s issue is? Greenland. Because if it goes nuclear, Russia's going to launch missiles over the Arctic Circle to attack us. And we've got to be prepared for that. And so that's what the Greenland thing is really about. And he made it clear that we're gonna have access to Greenland whether you like it or not, because it's in our national security interest. Okay, so and everybody was like, "Oh, what's he talking about? This could be terrible." Before it's over, he goes, "Yeah, we've got a framework for a Greenland deal. U.S. to gain total access to Greenland without payment," Trump says. All right, President Donald Trump said on January 22nd. That the United States is negotiating an arrangement to secure full access to Greenland with no payment, return, and unconstrained by any time limit. The president has described U.S. control of the Arctic island as essential to both national and international security. In remarks to Fox News' Maria Bartiromo, Trump said that the details of the deal are still being finalized, but essentially it's total access to Greenland for the United States, which will not have to pay anything in exchange and will not be subject to any time caps. There's no end. There's no time limit, Trump said. We're not doing a 99-year deal or a 10-year deal or anything else. Trump said the deal would provide broad U.S. military access to Greenland and reiterate his plans for the construction of a Golden Dome missile defense shield that he said would be made in the United States and would also help NATO. And what happened is, if you watched the summit at all, you saw when Trump got with the NATO head, the NATO guy said, hey, folks, calm down about this Greenland thing. Trump's right. It's a major security issue. And then I was watching a video last night on this podcast I like a lot. It's called Trigonometry. Two British guys do it. I think the one's an ex-Russian, but it's really, they always have some good guests. And they had this woman on I've never heard of, who has worked for the Reagan and worked for the Bush and family. Her father was apparently the. She was telling some things about Iceland. I did not, or Greenland. Again, I made the same mistake they criticized Trump for making about Greenland. That there's this, that it is like the portal to space, and that space is going to be the most important military battleground going forward. And it has to do with them literally beaming energy from space to Earth to go out to the world. And it's going to happen through Greenland. I'll try to post that video for you as well, but you might want to do some research. But there's a reason that Trump does what he does. Now, you may not like the methods, but yeah, guess what? He's getting the deal. And that deal isn't because Donald Trump, some egotistical maniac who wants to be the next, he wants to be Putin. No, he's doing it because it has to be done. Just like the Panama Canal, just like Venezuela, just like stopping Iran from funding terrorism. We'll talk about that in the second half of the podcast. So it's a big deal, okay? And I just want to give you this one little story, though, about Greenland that I was like, whoa, where did this come from that you didn't hear anywhere else? I'm sure it got very little publicity. Denmark's dirty little secret about population control in Greenland. What is this about? Okay, so all this controversy is going on, and Denmark is, they have done nothing with Greenland, all right, and yet then it's like, we can't have Trump get a hold of it because he might do something with it, and we like doing nothing with it. Well, here's something they did with it that pretty ugly. I think I posted on X, and if you follow me at X, it's Tom Z, WTPC on X.com, Tom Z, WTPC. I said, as if we haven't seen all the ugliness of the world, then we get this. Denmark has controlled Greenland since, get this, 1721. Okay, 1721. Indigenous people lived there for thousands of years before that. In 1953, the world's largest island transitioned from colony to become part of the Kingdom of Denmark. Today, its domestic affairs are considered self-rule, while Denmark is responsible for Greenland's foreign policy, defense, and currency. But with regard to Greenland and the women who have lived there, Denmark has a dirty little secret centered on population control, a relatively recent birth control practice that was forced on thousands of women, for which the country only apologized last September. Denmark apologized for this just a couple months ago. According to the Council of Foreign Relations, a group of independent researchers released a report that followed a 2-year investigation. That investigation found that Denmark, from 1966 through 1992, so like 30 years, forced sterilization on more than 4,500 women and girls in Greenland, some as young as 12 years old. Many, if most, were never told. In the name of population controls, doctors implanted an intrauterine device in the unsuspecting patients. And there's a video, I'll post this story and on the link, and you can watch the video of a woman who said, I was told as a young girl I had to go in to see the doctor. I wasn't sure what they were doing. My stomach hurt some for a while, and then I could never get pregnant. They literally put IUDs, a copper IUD, in these girls to keep them from having babies. Okay, so tell me about how bad Donald Trump is. Yeah, tell me how bad Donald Trump is. So anyway, There was a lot going on at Davos. Trump named the members of his new peace group that's going to, be the body that, helps develop the Gaza Strip after they stop Hamas from killing each other and killing everybody. Okay. And, that's a story for another day. I don't want to get too much into that because there's all kinds of things going on there where this thing might be the start of a new United Nations and stuff. So we'll talk about that later. But let me just play this video clip from Howard Lutnick, which kind of kicked off the Davos visit. This happened even before Trump's speech, but it just was very powerful. Watch this.
Well, I think you should start at a much higher level. Okay? We are in Davos at the World Economic Forum. And the Trump administration and myself, we are here to make a very clear point. Globalization has failed the West and the United States of America. It's a failed policy. It is what the WEF has stood for, which is export, offshore, far shore, find the cheapest labor in the world, and the world is a better place for it. The fact is, it has left America behind. It has left the American workers behind. And what we are here to say is that America First is a different model, one that we encourage other countries to consider, which is that our workers come first. We can have policies that impact our workers. Sovereignty is your borders. You're entitled to have borders. You shouldn't offshore your medicine. You shouldn't offshore your semiconductors. You shouldn't offshore your entire industrial base and have it be hollowed out beneath you. You should not be dependent for that which is fundamental to your sovereignty on any other nation. And if you're going to be dependent on someone, it darn well better be your best allies. Okay? And so that is a different way of thinking. It is completely different than the WEF. I viewed the WEF as not a flagpole in the middle, but in fact, they are the flag. Whichever way the wind blew, so it blew. You should have solar, you should have wind. Why are you going to do solar and wind? Why would Europe agree to be net zero in 2030 when they don't make a battery? They don't make a battery. So if they go 2030, they are deciding to be subservient to China, who makes the batteries.
And it went on and on for there. In Trump's speech, he said, you idiots are putting windmills everywhere, and China makes them. You buy them from China. Did you notice that China doesn't have any windmills? Do you understand that? It was embarrassing, but it was powerful. Because basically, the big story of Davos was, all the climate bullcrap was gone. Nobody was talking about climate, okay? Al Gore was practically tossed out of the building, all right? Because the hoax is over. Reality is setting in. The German chancellor said it was a catastrophic mistake for us to shut off our nuclear power plants. No kidding. Yes, it was. And now you're going to pay the price. But listen to what Trump said. We want strong allies. We don't want weak allies. And so you're not going to use us as a crutch. We're going to force you to man up as countries. And that's the problem. So what you're seeing here is what you saw at Yalta during World War II. You younger people, go look it up, okay? But what they did is after World War II, the communist Chinese, Stalin, okay, and Roosevelt, or the U.S., we basically said, how do we go forward into the future? And what Donald Trump is doing is we're reshuffling the whole table. We're redoing the Monroe Doctrine with the Donroe Doctrine that says the Western Hemisphere is ours. South America, you keep out of it, all right? And the Europeans are struggling for finding a place because they haven't earned it. And so here's the problem for them. The elites don't want to give it up. That's why they're forcing censorship. If you're not following the censorship in Europe, start following it. look, search on it on your AI or on your browser. Start reading stories about why does the Europeans want to censor people? Because their ideas are wrong and the people know it, but they don't want them to build political force. And so in every country, in France, in particularly in Germany, Farage in England, he's going to win big time in England because the people there see what happened here, saw what you and I did, and the whole West is starting to change. Donald Trump is that change agent. The stakes are high. Literally, survival is on the line. But Trump is trying to say to Russia, to China, to Europe, to all these people, why fight? You can fight the past, right? Why does Europe not? The reason there's not a settlement in Ukraine and Russia, and there's a bilateral meeting going on right now, with Witkoff and those guys are in Russia right now talking about a peace deal. Why isn't there a peace deal in Ukraine? Because the Europeans don't want it. They don't want it because they want to fight Russia. And Trump's like, you're idiots. Doesn't matter whether you like Russia or not. Doesn't matter if Putin's an evil person. Doesn't matter if he's right or wrong. It's stupid to spend your money fighting wars where there's no return on the investment. You pay for the weapons, they get used up, and they're worthless. And he's saying the same thing to Russia and China. The message to China is, hey, you really want to take on the United States? Your economy's in ruins. Your population's crashing. I'm offering you a chance to be part of a future in the world of unbelievable abundance and no wars. Be smart enough to take it. That's what Donald Trump is really doing here, folks. And that's why he's going to go down as one of the greatest presidents in the history of the world. One of the greatest leaders in the history of the world. So that's my take on what Davos was. You may disagree. Okay, if you've got some other insights, please write to me at info@wethepeopleconvention.org, info@wethepeopleconvention.org, and just say, here's my take. I want to hear from you. That's important. But that was a story that I thought I should kick off with. Now, let's go into the whole thing in Minneapolis because it keeps going. But finally, we saw some action. This was good news. FBI served subpoenas on Walz, Fry, and Ellison for interfering with ICE efforts. And we were like, yeah, no kidding. It's called insurrection. The FBI doled out federal criminal investigation subpoenas to offices of Governor Tim Walz, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry, Attorney General Keith Ellison for allegedly conspiring to interfere with immigration and customs enforcement actions in the state. 6 offices were subpoenaed in total so far, Fox News' Bill Meglin reported. Sources also told the outlet that the FBI served the subpoenas seeking records and communications. Fry's office confirmed to the Daily Wire that it had received the FBI subpoenas. Walz publicly blasted the investigation on Tuesday. Well, why wouldn't he, right? He's trying to hide, folks. He's got real problems. He said, let me be absolutely clear. The state of Minnesota will not be drawn into political theater. You are political theater, you clown. You're a circus clown, Tim Walz. This Justice Department investigation, sparked by calls for accountability in the face of violence, chaos, and the killing of Renee Good, does not seek justice, Walz said in a statement. It is a partisan distraction. Minnesotans are more concerned with safety and peace rather than with baseless legal tactics aimed at intimidating public servants standing shoulder to shoulder with their community. Okay? So look what he says. This investigation was sparked by calls for accountability in the face of violence, chaos, and killing. All right? But rather than say that ICE is the one for the violence, it's Walz who's calling for people to intimidate the ICE agents. And the evidence is there. And you want to see some more evidence? This story broke, and there was other stuff going on, so it quickly got hidden. But I think this story may be the focal point of why Walz and Ellison and all these guys are going to go to prison, because this is direct insurrection. Internal emails sparked firestorm. Minneapolis officials allegedly coordinating tracking of ICE agents. Now get that. There's emails that have been leaked that Minneapolis government officials are coordinating and tracking ICE officials and helping to stop them from doing their job. A controversial internal communications has surfaced in the Twin Cities, reportedly showing municipal employees coordinating with outside groups to monitor federal law enforcement. According to a report aired on Fox and Friends Weekend, a Friday email sent to city staff confirms that Minneapolis officials are collaborating with partners and community groups to track the movements of ICE agents and share intelligence on their whereabouts. The revelation comes amid a tense backdrop in Minnesota where anti-ICE protesters have intensified in recent weeks. The lead correspondent suggests a shift from passive non-cooperation to active surveillance of federal authorities by local government workers. The email in question reported details an arrangement where city resources or personnel assisted in gathering information on ICE operations, but then providing that information to these activist groups so they could interfere. That's a smoking gun. That's serious stuff. And then things escalated last Sunday. Minneapolis church invasion. Feds arrest third suspects, and it's a good one. So what happened? On Sunday, there's a church service going on, and the radicals plotted this. They came in from every door and interrupted the services and started to berate the Christians and just basically destroy their service. That's illegal. There's laws against that. The U.S. Department of Justice announced today that it has arrested a third suspect in connection with the invasion of church services past Sunday at City's Church in St. Paul's. It's William Kelly. You may remember him. He's the anti-ICE agitator who has been challenging Attorney Pam Bondi and the DOJ to arrest him after taking part in storming the city's church service. And here's his picture. That's the guy right there. He's deranged. He's a loudmouth. He's dangerous. He needed to be arrested because when you saw what he did and what he said to children, he's going to do something, folks. This is the kind of people who kill people, okay? And so they arrested him. Kelly joins Nakima Levy Armstrong and Chantilla Louisa Allen in handcuffs, following their roles in leading a militant group into a Baptist church and disrupting services. Attorney General Pam Bondi and FBI Director Kash Patel today announced the three were arrested under U.S. Code 18241, which is violated when two or more persons conspire to injure, oppress, threaten, or intimidate any person in any state, territory, commonwealth, possession, or district in the free exercise or enjoyment of any right or privilege secured to him by the Constitution or the laws of the United States. It has already been shown that that law applies to interrupting church services, and they're going to be charged. Now, the scandal of the week is that Don Lemon, the disgraced and fired CNN announcer who has basically found, it has no following anymore, is trying to make a name for himself. So he participated in it and then claimed he was a journalist and wasn't subject to the law. But there's video showing him helping to organize it, okay? And so what happened? The Justice Department tried to file charges against him, and a federal judge in Minneapolis, refused to sign the papers. Oh, but it just turns out that his wife works for Attorney General Keith Ellison, who's also under investigation, and she's been posting on social media all kinds of anti-ICE hatred. Now, let me ask you a question. You went to law school. You're a federal frickin' judge, right? Your wife is clearly on the record as being prejudiced against this case, and you don't recuse yourself? That's the problem, kids. That's the problem we have in our country. The lawyers and the judges don't follow the law, don't believe in the law. They think they are the law. They accuse Donald Trump of being a king, but who's the king? Oh, I am. I'm going to say we're not going to sign this. Yeah, well, Pam Bondi had an answer to that. They will be going a different route. Lemon broke the law. He's going to go to jail too. That's going to be great. You know what else is great? This is great. After all the hysteria, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. The left is always wrong. When you see them going crazy, just wait 24 hours or 36 or whatever, and it's wrong. Here is why ICE agent involved in shooting will not be charged and should sue everyone. I posted this story at WeThePeopleConvention.org. We sent out a text and an email about this because we thought it was a good story. You should come and read it. If you don't get our texts and emails, go to WeThePeopleConvention.org, right on the front page, put it in there, because there's lots of times there's breaking news in the world of Trump that I need to get to you right away that requires you to act in defense of your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. In this article, it says, ICE agent who shot and killed protesters will not be charged. Oversight Project President Mike Howell joined the Signal shutdown this week to discuss a new force analysis conducted by the Oversight Project in the ICE-involved shooting of a woman in Minnesota. Our team of career law enforcement has carefully reviewed all available evidence and has cleared the officer, the force analysis reads from the Oversight Project, which has more than 60 years of law enforcement experience on its team. The ICE officer in question is not only innocent, but was entirely justified in his actions. We pray that the far left comes to their senses and ends this violence, this needless violence, because there's nothing to see here. Okay? So what has happened since that shooting? The idiot, ignorant mayor of Minneapolis, he just said it was murder. This is murder. And the car didn't even touch him. He had no reason to shoot. And now we found out the officer has internal bleeding because the car hit him so hard. Okay? There's newscasters who said this officer was a murderer. He needs to sue every one of them. Follow the Donald Trump rule. They slandered this officer. He's not going to be charged because he was totally within his rights. And he was defending himself, self-defense. And that's good news. So share that story. Go to WeThePeopleConvention.org. And then on every page on our website, there's these little share links. And you just can click on it, and it'll copy the URL for that story. And if you click on the email one, it'll open your email and put it in the email. If you do a text message, it'll open your text message thing and put the URL there. And you can say, hey, I saw this story. You might be interested, and send it. That's what I need you to do that, okay? That's really important. So the Minnesota fraud thing, though, understand, the riots and the protests are a cover-up for the fraud. That's what you got to understand. The story here is the fraud. I told you guys last week that what a lot of politicians don't get is the ICE stuff doesn't really affect us personally. There's no ICE agents breaking into my neighbor's house. I don't have illegal aliens around me, okay? So it's interesting, and it sure is important because that's where the insurrection is being fought. But what really affects us is they're stealing our money, and these people let them. And we're going to talk about that. So here's the first story that Dr. Oz says Minnesota fraud cover-up reaches highest levels of state government. Well, how would Dr. Oz know this? Well, a lot of it's healthcare fraud, okay? Dr. Mehmet Oz, administrator for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, revealed that healthcare fraud in Minnesota is more significant than previously known. After speaking to whistleblowers across the state, Oz said there has been a cover-up for years, and it reaches the highest level of state government. The one woman I covered a couple weeks ago who they arrested, and she had to give back her Lamborghini or whatever it was, who stole like $250 million, she's literally singing. And she's saying that Walls and Ellison and these guys all knew about it, okay? There's tons of whistleblowers. Remember, that right when this started, was it 400 government employees did a letter saying Tim Walz knew about it and went after them when they tried to warn him about it? Folks, Walz, Ellison, they're fried. They're going to prison. They stole money. That's the real story. After speaking with whistleblowers across the strait, Oz said there has been a cover-up for years. Oz made reference to Somalian Americans and Somali nationals who have a significant presence in the Minneapolis Twin Cities area who have recently been accused by administrations of engaging in defrauding the federal government entitlement programs, including Medicare. For example, he said, the Somali subpopulation who has different cultural mores than folks who have historically been in Minnesota, you think, might be taking advantage of the system we built for Minnesota's nice people, Oz said. What a kind way to put that. The administration has gained evidence now that we might be seeing that in other Somali populations. They talk to each other. We've talked about Ohio. We're going to talk next about Maine. Providing an example, Oz said the investigators in Twin Cities discovered a building with boarded up windows that allegedly had 400 businesses running out of there in the last couple of years that had generated about $80 million. It had generated $80 million in bills from the federal government. There's nobody there. They're just stealing you blind. You're watching this podcast. They're not just stealing the people of Minnesota blind. These are federal dollars. And yeah, Congress, no oversight. Nobody did anything for years. It's just ridiculous. So, well, that is, the real story. The other question is ICE achieving their goals? And I would give the Trump team maybe a B or a B minus on how this whole thing has been handled, because they haven't controlled the narrative. They've let the left control the narrative. And here's a glaring example, because I kept calling for this. We found out this week that more than 10,000 illegal immigrants have been arrested in Minnesota. 10,000 since December. That's what I voted for. That's what we want to see. Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem announced on January 19th that more than 10,000 criminal illegal immigrants have been arrested by federal law enforcement officers during an ongoing immigration-related operation in Minneapolis. We have arrested over 10,000 criminal illegal aliens who were killing Americans, hurting children, and raining terror in Minneapolis, Noem wrote. In the last 6 weeks, our brave DHS law enforcement have arrested 3,000 criminal illegal aliens, including vicious murderers, rapists, child pedophiles, and incredibly dangerous individuals. A huge victory for public safety. Yeah, it would have been nice to know that data throughout this whole scandal, but they were controlling the narrative. 2,000 law enforcement officers of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, as well as other agencies, have been deployed to Minnesota cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul since December 1st as part of Operation Metro Surge. That's what we needed to see. It's working. The goal is what? To get the illegals out of our country. And we're doing it. And yeah, it doesn't look pretty when you've got to use masked ICE agents to do it. But that's what the left wants. That's their strategy, right? I got into an argument with a relative who was saying, ICE shouldn't wear masks. ICE shouldn't be wearing masks. I said, why do you think they're wearing masks? Do you know that ICE never wore masks? Do you know that as early as last year when this all started in Los Angeles, ICE wasn't wearing masks? Why are they wearing masks? Oh, because the NGOs, the Communist Chinese, the Marxists, paid people in Los Angeles to take pictures of their faces and use facial recognition software to identify them, then to dox them, then to harass them and their families. Yeah, so guess what? They should be wearing masks. The left made them wear masks, and then they're saying, look, they're wearing masks. You got to explain that to folks. We have to control the narrative. That's the role we play. You and I play. That's why you watch this podcast. That's a direct ask. You need to say to people, hey, does it bother you if the ICE guys have masks on? Yeah, why do they have masks on? Remember, when you're trying to persuade people, don't lecture them, ask them questions, and then answer. When they answer, they'll figure out that they don't know what they're talking about. Okay? That's something we taught you a long time ago. Take that to the bank. So you don't say, hey, let me tell you about those ICE officers. You say, man, does it bother you that these ICE officers are wearing masks? And why do you think that is? Let it sit and let them tell you. That's how you educate people. All right. Anyway, so we're celebrating that. We want to see more of that. And then to show you about how important it is to control the narrative, there was another Smollett type story that came out. Oh, ICE arrested a 5-year-old outside of his daycare or school or whatever. Total lie. Total lie. J.D. Vance addressed that. Watch this.
Vice President Vance, a local school district here is alleging ICE agents detaining a 5-year-old after preschool on Tuesday. We've also seen multiple American citizens detained by ICE or harassed by ICE in the last 6 weeks. Are you proud of how your administration is conducting this immigration crackdown here in Minnesota right now?
Well, I'm proud of the fact that we're standing behind law enforcement, and I'm proud of the fact that we're enforcing the country's laws. But, you asked a question about this 5-year-old kid. I actually saw this terrible story while I was coming to Minneapolis. We just left Toledo, Ohio this morning for an economic messaging event. And I see this story, and I'm a father of a 5-year-old, actually, a 5-year-old little boy. And I think to myself, oh my God, this is terrible. How did we arrest a 5-year-old? Well, I do a little bit more follow-up research. And what I find is that the 5-year-old was not arrested, that his dad was an illegal alien. And then when they went to arrest his illegal alien father, the father ran. So the story is that ICE detained a 5-year-old. Well, what are they supposed to do? Are they supposed to let a 5-year-old child freeze to death? Are they not supposed to arrest an illegal alien in the United States of America? If the argument is that you can't arrest people who have violated our laws because they have children, then every single parent is going to be completely given immunity from ever being the subject of law enforcement. That doesn't make any sense. No one thinks that makes any sense.
Oh, the left thinks that makes sense, okay? The left does. So how do you control the narrative? This story's been going all around, and people will believe it because they want to. They don't want to know the truth. Like he said, I did a little more research. Well, how come that reporter that asked the question didn't do a little more research? They don't want to. They're looking for a narrative to attack the United States, to make our law enforcement officers look bad, look like they're not enforcing the law, they're breaking the law. See how it goes? What is your job? Your job is to take that video, which will be on the podcast page at wethepeopleconvention.org, right on the front page, click on the podcast link. You'll see every story in this podcast listed with links to the article or the video, and you need to go to that podcast page, click on that link, and send that video to everyone you can, or post it on your social media to kill the narrative. And then remember to add a little comment that says, don't ever believe what the left reports in the news media because it's almost always a lie. Expose them, ridicule them. That's how you get people to stop listening to them. That's what we do here. That's what our job is, okay? And so I said we'd be talking about other things. Well, ICE launches Operation Catch of the Day. You got to love this stuff that they do because they name these things, Catch of the Day for Maine. That's lobster talk, okay? You got to love it because why? The same Dr. Oz said. The Somalis talk to each other, and there's all kinds of illegal activity going on over there, right? Immigration and Customs Enforcement began an operation targeting illegal immigrants in Maine, announced on January 21st. In a statement, the party said Operation Catch of the Day would go after the worst criminal illegal aliens who have terrorized communities, and that it started on January 20th. The agency highlighted arrests of multiple illegal immigrants with prior convictions. We have launched Operation Catch of the Day to target the worst of the worst criminal illegal aliens in the state, DHS Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin said. On the first day of operations, we arrested illegal aliens convicted of aggravated assault, false imprisonment, and endangering the welfare of a child. The DHS statement included mugshots of illegal immigrants with criminal backgrounds, including people from Ethiopia, Sudan, Angola, and Guatemala. Some of the other charges listed included cocaine possession, driving under the influence, violation of a protection order, and obstruction of justice, it said. ICE Assistant Director Patricia Hyde told Fox News in an interview on January 20th that ICE is targeting about 1,400 individuals in Maine who have been convicted of rape of a child, drug trafficking, sexual assaults, and more. Okay? I love it. We got to go wherever we got to go, all right? But here's the thing that's really interesting. Oh, all of a sudden, all these protesters show up in Maine like magic. Like, how did that happen? Who paid for their plane tickets? Who paid for their bus trips? Who's paid for their hotels? Who's paying for their food? It's an organized insurrection. You and I wrote to President Trump at whitehouse.gov/contacts and said, invoke the Insurrection Act. Fortunately, freezing cold winter weather came into Minneapolis, and yesterday they were going to have a shutdown Minneapolis thing to get ice out of Minnesota, and unfortunately because of the weather the schools were closed anyway, and it's kind of a nothing burger. But this is going to be happening all over our country, and maybe Trump is just waiting to do the Insurrection Act when it's happening in multiple locations, not just in one state. I don't know. But I do know this. We talked about it in the last several weeks about how this is an international fraud. This is the Somali government literally using expat Somalis to come to the United States and steal our money to fund their country, just like Mexico does, right? But the other component that hasn't had enough coverage is the Democrats are directly benefiting with votes and money, and they're directly involved. And here's some proof on that. In Somali fraud scandal, Republicans probe evidence of a blue state election scheme. Yeah, a blue state election scheme. I think the evidence is going to be pretty clear to that. Republicans are now on the investigative prowl and sounding increasingly confident, excuse me, they can find and prove there was an intentional strategy by Democrats to hijack elections and manipulate appointments in deep blue states like Minnesota. The Republican argument goes like this. Democrats reversed Donald Trump's related first-term executive orders and ensured that non-citizens, including illegal migrants, could be counted in the U.S. Census. Then, right, and they did that, then Biden opened the southern border so that millions of illegals could flood the country in just a few years. Next, liberal nonprofits helped move those immigrants from the southern border red states where they were not particularly welcome to sanctuary cities and Democrat-run cities in election battleground states and helped them enroll in welfare at taxpayers' expenses, with which Oz is saying he's going to get out of. Finally, Democratic leaders like failed vice presidential candidate Minnesota Governor Tim Walz failed to act or even looked the other way when evidence emerged that non-citizens were defrauding those safety net programs by the tune of billions of dollars, and liberal judges blocked efforts to stop and punish the fraud. Okay? He didn't look the other way. He actually paved the road. He was complete. Ellison literally was on videotape saying he was going to help them steal the money. Okay? He's an idiot. But Republicans are now on the investigative prowl and sounding increasingly confident they can prove it's intentional. No question, 100%, this was a coordinated effort to get more Democratic voters into these states. House Oversight Committee James Comer said, who is taking the lead in this panel investigating the fraud scheme. And basically, what we found in Maine particularly is, and I've told you about this, and I have a video at WeThePeopleConvention.org. You will see the video of the reporter from Maine who literally has laid it all out. Basically, the Democratic governor of Maine, the attorney general there, they knew the fraud was going on. They helped the Somalis steal the money. Somalis kicked money back to them in their election campaigns, and then Somalis registered to vote even when they're not legal and ballot harvested and elected them. All right, is that enough of a criminal conspiracy for you? That's how all these people get elected in California and in New York, in Maine, in Michigan, in Minnesota. We're ending that. Think that's not going to have an impact on the 2026 election? Stay tuned. All of this is really, really important. All right, so we're getting towards the end of the first half of the podcast, so I want to just kind of cover a couple more stories because, again, and you're going to see Peter Schweitzer has a new book. In the second half of the podcast, we're going to talk about how this is all a plan, okay? But this stuff, it's just coming out. We knew. We say, and today, everybody says, oh, Trump's lying, the government's lying, you can't trust them. And yeah, they are on a lot of things. And we said during the Obama years and the Biden years and stuff, they were just liars, okay? About jobs, about everything. So this comes out. Research suggests as many as 6.4 million, get this now, unwittingly enrolled in Obamacare with taxpayer subsidies. Unwittingly. 6.4 million people. That's not a few people. What does this mean? In exchange for gift cards, get this, I'll give you a $50 grocery store gift card if you sign these papers. Millions of Americans were unwittingly signed up for Obamacare by brokers who scalped their vital information and enrolled them in plans where premiums were paid by the American people for medical insurance. The government was sending massive checks to insurance companies who were making windfall profits on behalf of people who didn't use any care because they didn't know they had signed up for any care. They wanted a gift card. They didn't sign up. In 2021-22, expansion of Affordable Care Act subsidies passed through the budget reconciliation. 21-22, that's Biden, okay? Republicans were there too. Made coverage fully subsidized for individuals claiming incomes in a specific range. Paragon Health Institute investigated and estimated that by 2025, at least 6.4 million more people were enrolled in these zero premium plans than were actually eligible. Okay? Zero premium means the enrollee did not pay for the plan. It was paid via subsidies from you and I. You know how much that was? That was like $6,000 a year. Like $500 a month per person for 6.4 million people paid by us. Okay? And what happened with that? In 2024, 40% of the people in fully subsidized plans used no health care services at all. But the insurance company gets to check up front from us, the taxpayers, the government, in case they did. How nuts is that? That's what Obamacare is about. According to the story, unscrupulous brokers enrolled agents exploited the system by advertising cash gift cards and free coverage, collecting personal information from callers and enrolling them. They were just calling up on the phone, often without their knowledge or consent, including fictitious individuals. Many enrollees never realized they had coverage because the government paid the full premium directly insurers to the insurance companies, which in turn paid substantial commissions to the enrolling brokers. In 2024, 40% of them were fully subsidized plans used no services are. Making matters worse, the insurance companies aren't even providing value. 85% of the insurance company revenue now comes from the taxpayers, not from citizens buying health care. Do you know why the Democrats did this? Because the insurance companies give all their money. 95% of the money insurance companies give to politicians go to Democrats. And that's why the Democrats are fighting like crazy, because at the end of this month, they have to reapprove the Obamacare subsidies, which is what this is, and they want it to be extended past Trump's presidency. Yeah, and 7 Republicans voted for it. We know who the enemy is, and here's the proof, okay? Here's the proof. House passes spending package to fund government. While the package includes some targeted spending reductions, it largely maintains funding at fiscal year 2025 levels. What does that mean? What's fiscal year 2025 levels mean? That means the same budget that Nancy Pelosi passed, that Joe Biden passed. They passed the same thing. The Republicans, who are in charge by a narrow margin, don't you know, didn't cut crap. The House passed a package of spending bills on January 22nd to fund the federal government. Lawmakers approved the measure funding the Department of Defense, Labor, Health and Human Services, Education, Transportation, and Housing and Urban Development by a vote of 341 to 88. All the Republicans voted, and most Democrats. A separate bill to fund the Department of Homeland Security passed by a vote of 220 to 207 because the Democrats didn't want to pass that bill because they want to defund ICE, don't you know, to do what? To cover up their crimes, to cover up their election fraud, right? Are you connecting the dots? You seeing the circle? There's the proof right there. They just voted. They voted against it because they wanted to defund ICE, because ICE are the investigators finding the fraud, finding the illegals they brought in who were voting for them. Connecting the dots? Well, the package includes some targeted spending reduction. It largely maintains funding at the fiscal 2025 levels. Representative Tom Cole of Oklahoma, the top Republican on the House Appropriations Committee, praised the legislation in a statement saying that it reflects the core tenets of America: American strength, combat-ready forces, secure communities, effective education and health systems, and modern transportation. He said that the package applies innovation and discipline to deliver results without waste. He's spitting in your face. This fool, Tom Cole, Republican in Oklahoma, our members in Oklahoma, you need to call this clown this week and say, stop lying to us. Oh, it provides effective education and health systems. Really? Effective? We just did a story that showed 6.4 million people were getting Medicaid, and the money, insurance companies were getting the checks and providing no services. That's effective? Innovative and disciplined efforts to deliver results without waste? Did you cut any waste? No, they did not. No, they did not. This is going to the Senate. And they deserve credit because for the first time in like 26 years, the Republicans have passed all the appropriation, all 12 appropriations bills, which is the way this is supposed to work. Not CRs, not the two Democratic and Republican leaders in a dark room saying we're going to spend $6 trillion, which is what has happened for 26 years. This time, they actually passed all 12 appropriations. And I've said to you, this is critical because that's how your congressman has any say about anything, because they're on these committees and they can actually put amendments up. They can put programs up. They can say, I want to cut this, and they can fight for it in committee and vote for it before it comes out to the full House. They didn't cut anything. They didn't cut anything. Because you know why? They benefit from it. I'm sorry. It's just the way it is. So we're going to keep spending with like drunken sailors, and let Trump take care of it. Let him, just turbocharge the economy, and we'll fund our way out of it through growth. But let's not cut anything. Oh my gosh, it's just a disgrace. You need to call your congressman. You should probably call your senator, because we don't want this to pass. We want the Senate to cut like $500 billion at least. The latest estimates that the fraud is about $1.4 trillion out of a $6 trillion budget or $7 trillion budget, whatever the hell it is. No cuts. You're going to stand for that? You're going to take that? You're going to call your senator instead and say, don't pass this without cuts. Why would I vote for you? Why would I vote for you when we all know our debt and our deficit is killing all of us and and ruining our money? The money you got in your 401k, the value of your house, is all undermined by the inflation caused by what? Government borrowing, government overspending. Call them up. Give them a little lecture about that. They won't like it. We don't care. They need to stop this nonsense. The only way they're going to stop it is if you hold their feet to the fire. Okay? All right. So we're going to wrap up the first half of the show and take a little break so I can get a drink of water, and then we'll be back after these messages. We're sure glad you joined us. We hope you got a lot out of the first half of the show. We hope you will take the actions we've outlined. Okay, share the Vance video, stuff like that, right? Call your senator. Say, don't pass this, dog. All right? And then we'll be back at the second half of the show where we've got lots more good information that you'll be able to use to share with your family and friends. Okay? You've been listening to the We the People Convention weekly news and opinion podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski, and we'll see you in a couple minutes. The We the People Convention news and opinion radio program is paid for by donors like you. You can donate to the We the People Convention and support our cause by going to wethepeopleconvention.org or by sending your check in any amount to We the People Convention, P.O. Box 6211, Akron, Ohio 44312. When you're playing a video, including our podcast, you'll see this little cloud button. And if you click it, it'll actually download the video to your hard disk. And this works on our podcast page as well. If you're playing our podcast, and it's going to be loud, so I won't play it for much, but there's our podcast playing, and you can see this little, download button. Okay. The other thing you got to notice on our podcast page is that there's a link here where you can send me a message about this podcast. Hey, it was great. Hey, I didn't like it. Something was wrong, or here's a correction, that kind of thing. You can use that link. And then these are the stories that I covered in this particular podcast. And you'll see there's links that go to the stories, to the articles that I used in reporting on that. So you can click on that. You'll also see that you can sign up for our emails and text messages, but you can also watch our podcast on Roku TV and on Amazon Fire TV. And these are the instructions for doing that. So this is all on our podcast page, right on the front page where the yellow button was. So if you click there, this is our podcast page. These are the instructions for watching on Roku TV or Amazon Fire. And I watch our podcast on TV. It just feels more comfortable. So you can do that. We're also on Rumble. If you go to Rumble, you should join Rumble. And it's Tom Z at WTPC. You'll see our podcast there. So you can get us a lot of different ways, including on Apple iTunes. And then this is an audio version of our podcast. If you click here, it'll just play the audio of the podcast. It will not, show you the video. So people can, listen to that while they're jogging or, working out, working in the yard, or just relaxing and just want to listen to the audio and not watch the video. And again, this is available on phone, on your iPad, on your laptop, on your computer, any way you want. And you can share, this, whatever you see. If you're on a page that you really like, and you see an article that you think, geez, I've got to share this article, with someone in my family. You can send them an email by clicking on the little envelope. You can post it on Parler or MeWe. If you click on this, you get all kinds of options, where you can put it on Twitter or Facebook, whatever, which we don't support, but you can do whatever you want. So we ask that you share what you see on our We the People Convention site, and that you get more people to look at it. Because that's the whole idea here, to help educate people, inform them. And then, as I said before, Link, we're not just about talk, we're about action. And in my podcast every week, which is published every Saturday. So if the new podcast usually comes out every Saturday. And in that podcast, I will ask you to do certain things that will help protect and defend your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. So that's the We the People Convention website. Come back often, use it to be informed, and share it with others. Thanks a lot. All right, and we're back for the second half of the podcast. In there, I say things like we're not on Facebook, we're not on Twitter. Yeah, we are now. Facebook. It's always Tom Z WTPC or We the People Convention. Facebook, Gab, Getter, MeWe, Instagram, YouTube. We're on everything but TikTok, and we're going to talk about that at the end of the podcast here. But, follow us, share the information, keep up on what's going on. But most importantly, share this podcast, because this is where a person can be literally, and you guys write to me all the time at info@wethepeopleconvention.org and say, I've stopped watching Fox. I've stopped watching any political news because it drives me crazy. It's all just garbage. It's misinformation. It's propaganda. But I'll watch your podcast because I feel like after I watch the We People Convention weekly news and opinion podcast, I know what's going on. I know what's important. I know why it's going on. And I have an action plan that I can do something about it. That's why people watch this podcast. And we thank you for doing that. And we thank our donors who support this, because here in 2026, folks, we're at war. We got to win the war this year. What does that mean? That means we got to stop the election fraud. We've got to defund the NGOs. The Republicans got to do what they promised to do, which they have not done, and we'll see how that goes. And then we got to turn out the vote in a big way without Donald Trump on the ballot. That's what we got to do. And the We the People Convention will be very actively engaged in that. And the more money we have, the more we can do. Many of you are new to this podcast, and even some of you are older, don't know about our organization. If you go to wethepeopleconvention.org, you'll see a button on the front. There's like 4 buttons. One of them says, learn more about the We the People Convention. Yeah, take a look at our history. We've punched way above our weight. We have changed the future of America. This organization, you have done that. And we're going to do it again this year. And if you're going to be part of that, if you can send us some money to help with that, we'd greatly appreciate it. Just go to wethepeopleconvention.org, click on the donate button, okay? We'd appreciate that. All right. So as you know, if you watch this podcast regularly, I try to go do some international stuff at the start of the second half of the podcast. I don't have a lot of that because we covered Davos and Greenland and all that. But we got to talk about Iran because that's kind of like hanging there, like what's going on. And I had some pretty strong opinions about President Trump saying, hey, we got your back to the Iranian protesters, and then lots of them were killed. Well, how many were killed? The Iranian government admitted, they said we killed 3,500 of our citizens. Imagine that. Could you imagine if the U.S. said we killed 3,500 of our citizens? We're freaking out over one woman who tried to run over an officer with her car who was killed, and it's like the whole world's on fire. 3,500 people? Yeah. They're liars. Here's the story. Iranian doctors reportedly say protest death toll is over 16,000. Genocide under the cover of digital darkness, right? So remember, the protests start, and I said, I think the CIA, I think Mossad, I think the fact that Iranians' currency collapsed ain't no accident, kids. There ain't no accidents in politics. We did that. We're trying to overthrow the government of Iran, okay? You just have to accept that. Now, how that happens, we'll see. But once it started and it started to get out of control, what did they do? They cut off the internet. That's why he's saying, under digital darkness, it was genocide. So what are these doctors saying? The Iranian regime has killed at least 16,500 people and injured over, get this, 330,000 more, as they continue to ruthlessly target demonstrators and even uninvolved civilians in a nationwide anti-government protest, a shocking new report claims. The alarming death toll far exceeds the roughly 3,500 verified by activist groups, was detailed in a new report from doctors on the ground treating victims amid the slaughter, the Sunday Times reported. The disturbing figures compiled from 8 major hospitals with 16 emergency room departments reveal between 16,500 and 18,000 people have been killed, with most victims believed to be younger than 30. Okay? These are young people. This is a whole new level of brutality, Professor Amir Parasat, an Iranian-German eye surgeon who spoke to the outlet on behalf of dozens of medical professionals in Tehran. In 2022, this is when there was previous riots in Iran, and Obama abandoned them and supported the regime. Trump has said he supports the protesters. In 2022, they were using rubber bullets and pellet guns taking out eyes. This time, they were using military-grade weapons, and what we are seeing are gunshots and shrapnel wounds in the head, neck, and chest, he continued. Okay? So that's what's going on. So what has Trump been doing? Well, Trump calls for regime change. President Donald Trump on Saturday last week called for regime change in Iran following protests that roiled the country in recent weeks. It's time to look for new leadership in Iran, Trump told Politico. The White House did not immediately respond to a request for comment regarding Trump's remarks. But I told you last week that on Laura Trump's show, this Iranian activist comes on and literally is talking to President Trump, saying, only you can help us overthrow the Ayatollah. We need you, President Trump. And I'm thinking, yeah, this guy's not on Laura Trump's show if the administration isn't orchestrating this, okay? Trump's comments came after Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei delivered a defiant address in which he accused Trump of encouraging agitators and said Iran considers Trump a criminal, both for the casualties, for the damages, and for the slander directed at the Iranian nation. Okay? And they've been taunting him. They had pictures, a set of Trump's assassination attempt in Butler, PA, saying, "We won't miss next time." Okay? They're taunting Donald Trump. So, what's his response? Oh, yeah. What do you think Trump's response is? President Donald Trump has warned Iran that he will wipe the country off the face of the earth if his regime follows through on any threats against him personally. When asked in an interview with News Nation on January 20th about his response to the Islamic Republic's continued taunts and threats against him, Trump said he had left a notification to the military, the U.S. military, that if anything happens to him, the whole country will get blown up. As president, a president has to defend a president, he said, but I have very firm instructions. Anything happens, they're going to wipe Iran off the face of the earth. Whoa. Yikes. And so guess what's happening right now, today, as I'm talking to you on January 24th at 9:39 in the morning when I'm recording this. The U.S. has a huge naval fleet sailing into the Mediterranean, or into the area of the seas that lead to Iran by Qatar, because I think he's going to do something. I think Trump is going to take him out. He spoke at Davos about the fact that we've got to stop spending money on terrorism. Who's the leading funder of terrorists? Iran. The critics will say Donald Trump is just crazy. He's doing this because he's a madman. Yeah, even madmen have methods to their madness. Trump ain't fooling around, and man, you're dumb. You are total. Maduro found out, didn't he? Yeah, he taunted Trump too. Remember him dancing? Yeah, where's he now? Ayatollah, he ain't going to get as good a treatment, let me tell you. Stay tuned, folks. This could happen in the coming days. Serious stuff. You need to be up on that, and I hope that helps you put it in perspective. The other story this week, and there was a lot of things, so it's hard to put this podcast together because it's going to be a little jumpy now, because there were important things. One of them was that traitor, Jack Smith, said he expects to be indicted after a nightmare hearing. Here's what happened. So Jack Smith testified to Congress behind closed doors and demanded that he get to do it publicly. So what? The Democrats could put on a show about Jack Smith's our hero. Donald Trump was involved with insurrection and Jack Smith went after him. And he's a great guy. Yeah, it didn't really go that well in the public hearings because the Republicans get to talk too. And it was pretty brutal. All right. So let me just cover some of the lowlights. Former Biden government special counsel Jack Smith publicly testified before the House Judiciary Committee on Thursday regarding his politically motivated investigations, and that's a statement that we will later prove, and prosecutions of President Donald J. Trump. Among the more explosive moments from the hearing were exchanges between Smith and Representative Brandon Gill from Texas and Darrell Issa from California regarding the former special counsel's methods in subpoenaing the phone records of former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. In addition, Smith admitted he expects to be indicted by President Trump's Department of Justice. The National Post reported last November that Smith, as part of the Biden government's Arctic Frost probe, targeted President Trump, requesting the personal cell phone records of then House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and then Representative Louis Gohmert from Texas during his probe into the January 6, 2021 Capitol protests. On May 25th of 2023, years later, the Federal Bureau of Investigation Criminal Division prepared a significant case notification outlining Smith's subpoena for phone records from AT&T and Verizon that targeted members of the House and Senate. On Thursday, Representative Darrell Issa revealed that the subpoena request submitted to a federal judge never actually named the individual for whom Smith was seeking the records. Did you, whether you think it was legal or not, whether you think it was right or not, did you withhold the name of Kevin McCarthy, Speaker of the House, when you were seeking records on Kevin McCarthy, the Speaker of the House, or Jim Jordan, the Chairman of the committee? Issa pressed with Trump responding, We did not provide that information to the judge when we requested a non-disclosure order consistent with the law and consistent with the department policy at that time. Okay? So the judge gives him the right to get records of someone the judge doesn't even know who it was, because the judge is on it, and he should be impeached for doing this. And I think it was Bossberg. Okay? Little movement on that going on, by the way, but so far not enough to get rid of him. He should be arrested. This judge helped commit an insurrection, a coup. Okay? Oh, but it got worse. It got worse. It was likely one of the most embarrassing moments for the former special counsel. He was asked, you prosecuted Virginia Governor Bob McConnell. You prosecuted him, correct? Tiffany asked. Smith waffled, claiming he was only a part of the prosecution, despite numerous public descriptions of him as a leading force behind the indictment and temporary commission of the former governor. McConnell's conviction was ultimately overturned in a unanimous decision by the U.S. Supreme Court, with several justices excoriating Smith and his team for overcharging the governor. It was political. This guy's a political operative, okay? And then, here's another little bombshell that came out. Oh, guess what? When Smith raided Mar-a-Lago, when he attacked Trump and filed like 3 of the lawsuits, he hadn't been sworn in to the office. Merrick Garland figured that out like 2 years later and swore him in. Everything he did was illegal. Everything he did was illegal. He's going to be charged. He's going to go to prison because he's a criminal. And even CNN, who, they wanted to cover it up, and boy, they wanted to cover only the Democrats, praising, Jack Smith and, praising Smith, saying that Donald Trump, tried to overthrow the U.S. government, when in fact it was the Democrats who did overthrow the U.S. government. Even CNN had to say this is all political. Here's a clip.
To your question, Brianna, the last congressman we saw brought up the fact that Jack Smith demanded a trial date 4 months out, 5 months out, in a case involving 13 million pages of documents. There is no defense lawyer in the country who can constitutionally prepare for trial and defend his client in that short a time frame. The implication was you were rushing to get this in before the 2024 election. Jack Smith did not defend himself, by the way. He didn't say a word about that, which I found strange. Yeah, it's true, right?
It's true.
Exactly.
I mean,
and he didn't defend
this
himself
case before the election.
Exactly. Right. And Jack Smith has always maintained this veneer that he never thought about the election. Of course he did. Why would you demand such a quick trial date?
Because it was political. There it is. Even CNN can see it. Oh, so much more to come. In Davos, Trump said, arrests are coming. The 2020 election is about to be prosecuted. And I'm hearing from John Solomon from Just the News. He's been on Steve Bannon's show. He's got his own show. And he's saying it's coming. They got the goods. They got lots of goods on people all over. And so I think we're finally seeing, right? We showed in Minnesota, they served walls on those guys. They arrested those 3, people who broke into the church. We're starting to see the justice that we demanded, and we better, because if we don't see it by the election, our people aren't going to turn out. Because the most important thing to me, quite honestly, the most important thing, what am I most concerned about restoring in our country? It's equal justice under the law. It's blind justice. It's rule of law, not rule of men and women. That's what pinpoint, third world monarchies and dictatorships and stuff, they're rule of men and women over you. What made us different? The rule of law. But when you have judges like that one in Minneapolis who wouldn't sign the papers for Don Lemon because his wife is on the other side and he doesn't recuse himself, that's the problem. That's what we're fighting to restore. And before Trump's term is over, we've got to find ways legislatively through that Congress or whatever where we can get rid of judges who violate the law. And until we do that, we aren't going to be the America that our founders gave us. So that's why I always beat on that so hard. Okay? So then, we've talked about the Somalis and we've talked about ICE and we've talked about deporting all these people. And here you go. Again, I said to you maybe 2 weeks ago or last week, the problem is, how can we know what's going on when we are swimming in a sea of lies and propaganda? You can just, you know, during COVID, the government lied to us, right? Biden lied all the time. They didn't tell you the truth about anything, about the inflation, about the economy, about illegal immigration or anything, right? Obama was the same way. It was the Obama people running Biden. He was just a stooge. He's an empty suit. The third term of Barack Obama was Joe Biden's 4 years. Well, here's what we got from Barack Obama and Joe Biden. Now we know Obama and Biden's deportation numbers were bogus. We're bogus. Oh, I know you're shocked. I'm sure you guys are shocked if you watch this show. How many times have you heard it said that Barack Obama was the deporter in chief? Remember, they would sell that to you. How many times did Joe Biden brag that he deported more illegal immigrants than Donald Trump had in his first term? Turns out those were wild distortions or of truth bordering, if you will, on outright lies. In late 2024, for example, we saw stories about how deportations that year were the largest in a decade, beating Trump's record in what would be his first term. As NPR put it, this meant that the Republican narrative that Biden administration had done nothing to combat illegal immigration is just not true, said NPR, who you can certainly trust and who we are defunding, and they're going bye-bye, okay, and their listenership is way down. The New York Times, of all places, called out the lie, albeit unintentionally. Over the weekend, it published a story about how many people Trump has deported. Except, in doing so, it broke down the numbers of deportations of people arrested inside the country and those arrested at the border. And that's the dirty little secret. Because when you say we deported people, what Obama and Biden were saying is these people who came to the border didn't have the right papers and we turned them away. They called that a deportation. No. But they didn't go into the country. They didn't go to California, okay, and find illegals and deport them. Here's a chart that you can see, okay? Look at the difference. Trump has actually deported 230,000 illegals last year in 1 year, which is more than Biden did in 4 years. And we just added like 10,000 more ICE agents and $100 billion of funding because we're going to get millions out. And that's what's important. So I use that story as a lead-in to this, which you're hearing a lot about, and you should. And if you're a reader, you should get Peter Schweizer's book. Okay? Peter Schweizer is out with a new book, The Invisible Coup. And basically what it says is immigration is a weapon to destroy the U.S. and the West. And this is what I've been telling you. You've been learning on this show. It's all funded by China to destroy us. And they bribed our elites in both parties and all over Europe to let it happen. Okay? It's all about the money. Now Schweizer's naming names and telling the story. So here's just a short excerpt of one story. Why are American progressives who believe in gay rights and abortion aligned with radical Islamists who want a religious dictatorship? Because the enemy of my enemy is my friend, writes Peter Schweizer in his new book, The Invisible Coup, How American and Elites and Foreign Powers Use Immigration as a Weapon. In this exclusive excerpt, he explains that they are after the same thing, the destruction of Western society from within. So here's this little clip. Ismail Embrasi, an accountant by training, seemed to be living a quiet life in Annandale, Virginia. But in 2004, when police officers noticed him driving with his wife across the Chesapeake Bay Bridge and filming its critical structural elements, they decided to act. They detained him and notified federal agents. He was already a suspect in a scheme to provide funding to Islamist terrorist groups, and now agents were searching through his home for further evidence of possible involvement about blowing up the bridge. Okay? They discovered far more than a terrorist funding scheme. Buried among the stacks of paperwork in his home was a document written in Arabic titled an explanatory memorandum on the general strategic goal for the Brotherhood in North America. Remember last week, I talked about Marco Rubio just declared the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and all over a terrorist organization. Just last week. This was 2004. Okay? Written by a U.S.-based Islamic leader from the Muslim Brotherhood. The Strategic Goals memo specifically addressed the civilization jihad process for using migration as a method of subversion. Members must understand their work in America is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their hands and their hands of their believers, that it is eliminated and God's religion is made victorious over all other religions. The Muslim Brotherhood specifically, and Islamists in general, have long viewed immigration as a weapon to deploy against the West. And I played for you, and it's still in our video section at WeThePeopleConvention.org, the Gad Sad video. It's only like 4 minutes that says, if we don't do these things, we are finished as a civilization. And those things were get rid of Sharia law, get rid of any immigrants like the Somalis who culturally do not fit with what we believe in, or you're doomed. Trump said the same thing at Davos. You've got to close your borders. You've got to deport the people who will never assimilate with you. Okay? This is all good news. Peter Schweizer's book lays it out chapter and verse, so there is no way to discredit it. Just like, the replacement theory that the Democrats kept saying, it's a conspiracy theory. We're not bringing in all these illegal immigrants to displace white people and white voters. Except they are, and it's true. Are we going to do something about it? I'm giving you the proof. You got to share this with people because people don't get it. They think, oh, no, these people just came here because they live in poor countries and they want a better life for their kids. Yeah, not so much. Okay? So this is another step. We talked last week that we want to see President Trump use economic force to remove the remaining 18 million that Biden let in. And we talked about E-Verify and going after the employers. And that hasn't happened yet. But this was a good step. Homeland Security seeks to restrict immigration from relying on welfare. So again, they're trying to take away the money. This is interesting how complicated it is, though. The Department of Homeland Security is seeking to change a rule that determines eligibility of permanent residency, commonly known as a green card, okay? Based on whether an applicant is considered a public charge, someone is likely to depend primarily on public benefits. So the idea is, to get a green card, you have to show that you can work and pay your way. But that's not what's happening, is it? That's not what's happening. The rule, known as public charge ground of inadmissibility, generally applies to green card applicants with exception of certain categories such as refugees and asylum seekers. In 2022, 54% of households headed by immigrants, naturalized, legal, and illegal, use one or more major welfare programs. That compared to 39% of U.S.-born households, according to the Census Bureau. In November 2025, DHS issued a proposal to repeal existing public charge regulations and institute a broader discretionary standard. The purpose of the proposed policy change would allow immigration officials to take into account the use of a wider range of public benefits, including food stamps, Medicaid, and housing assistance, to determine whether a green card applicant will become a public charge, meaning be on the dole, or should they be denied a green card because of that and deported. In the Dr. Oz article, I didn't read that section to you, 89% of the Somalis in Minnesota are on public assistance. 89%. By definition, they should have been denied green cards. They should have been deported. They're going to be now, but they robbed us blind for decades. That's the problem. That's the problem we're trying to fix. And that's a good step towards trying to fix it. But remember, all of this is executive orders. This rule change that they're doing is reversing what? The Biden change. If we lose in 2026, if we lose in 2028, They're just going to put it back in. Congress, your congressman, your senator, House member, have to vote to make this the law. They're not, are they? Yeah, why is that? Yeah, you should call them up and ask them. You should meet them when they come in your community and ask them. This was a surprise and kind of weird, I thought, kind of interesting. Back to the future. As Trump FCC clamps down on late night and daytime TV bias. Federal Communications Commissioner Chief Brendan Carr issued new regulatory guidance on January 21st, warning broadcasters that late night and daytime talk shows must comply with federal equal time rules when featuring political candidates in a move to combat the clear leftist bias among TV hosts. The guidance directs broadcast stations to ensure that political candidates are given equal opportunities on programs such as morning shows and late night comedy, pushing back on what Carr describes as a long-standing assumption that such shows automatically qualify as bona fide news programming. Carr argued that this exemption has been stretched to cover content driven by partisan intent. For years, legacy TV networks assumed that their late night and daytime talk shows qualified as bona fide news programs, even when motivated by purely partisan political purposes. Today, the FCI reminded them of their obligation to provide all candidates. Okay? The Carr then had previously cited ABC's daytime program The View as an example of a show that could face scrutiny, and his comments followed earlier criticism of Jimmy Kimmel Live. And so the bottom line is, what was it? I think it was Jimmy Kimmel Live, The View. They had like 134 Democratic elected officials on The View and one Republican in like the last 3 years. Well, yeah, it's the public airwaves. There's rules. They haven't been following the rules. Gee, why wasn't anybody enforcing the rules? Gee, Brendan Carr, how come it took you a year to enforce the rules? How much damage was done to President Trump, to our agenda, over the last year by The View and by, Jimmy Kimmel and all the other stuff? Right? So, okay, if there's a law, why weren't we following it? We're sure glad you are, okay? We're sure glad you are. And so then again, in the media and all this stuff, I said the officer that was accused of murder wrongly by anchors at news agencies and by politicians to sue them all. Well, it's all coming from Trump because, man, he's been suing and winning. He's suing the BBC for, what was it, $1 billion? He won suits against CBS and stuff for the changing the interview with Michelle Obama during the election. So Trump says he's going to sue J.P. Morgan Chase and Jamie Dimon, their chairman, over debanking. Wow, that's pretty interesting. And can all of us do that? Can the people like Dan Bongino and Clay and Buck and True the Vote, who got debanked, do that? I sure hope so. Because what they did is wrong, and if Trump thinks there's a legal case, maybe we should all do that. President Donald Trump on January 17th said he intends to file a lawsuit against J.P. Morgan Chase for what he said were efforts to remove his access to banking following the January 6th U.S. Capitol breach. In a post on Truth Social, the president wrote, "I will be suing J.P. Morgan Chase over the next 2 weeks for incorrectly and inappropriately debanking me after the January 6th protest, a protest that turned out to be correct for those doing the protesting." He also wrote that the 2020 presidential election was rigged against him. A spokesman for the banking giant, Trix Wexler, told media outlets in response that J.P. Morgan won't get specific about who they debanked, but stipulated that it does not close accounts because of political beliefs. Except they did. And Jamie Dimon admitted it. And now they're claiming, they did it because the Biden administration forced them to. Well, regardless, you did it. You're culpable. In August 2025, Trump issued an executive order to ensure that banks cannot refuse services to individuals based on their political or religious beliefs, a practice known as debanking. A watchdog group in December has found that 9 large banks, U.S. banks, actively engaged in the practice between 2020 and 2025. Good. Sue them. That's wrong. That's how you politically strip people of their rights. That's what Barack Obama did to me and many of you watching, and all the Tea Party groups when they set the IRS on us, okay? That's government using the force of government to attack their political critics. That's what's going on in Europe. The Europeans, In England, why are they arresting people who post on X that these Islamists have rape gangs who are raping our little girls? And they don't put the Islamists in jail. They put the British citizen who texted in jail. Why are they doing that? Because the British government is allowing the Islamists to do this, and they don't want you to know that, and they don't want the public to know that. But they're finding out anyway, aren't they? Okay? See how the world's working? See how we're trying to change it? See how Donald Trump is trying to change it? It's important. So he's suing J.P. Morgan. We talked about he's concerned about credit card interest rates. He's concerned about homes mortgages. He signed an order to bar Wall Street firms from buying houses. He did it. President Donald Trump on Tuesday signed an executive order that prohibits Wall Street firms from purchasing single-family homes. To preserve the supply of single-family homes for American families and increase the path to ownership, it is a policy of my administration that large institutional investors should not buy single-family homes that could otherwise be purchased by families, Trump wrote in an executive order titled Stopping Wall Street from Competing with Main Street Home Buyers. I don't know if this is legal. It's an executive order. I don't know if it'll really work. Here's some facts that really kind of fill it in. Wall Street giants, including Blackstone, America Homes for Rent, and Progress Residential, bought hundreds of thousands of single-family homes following the 2008 financial crisis, snapping up distressed properties and converting them into rentals. The New York Post explained these investors, as of 2022, now own over 450,000 homes and are about 3% of all single-family rental homes across the country. Now, that's a kind of two things. Rental homes versus total homes, I don't know. In 22 specific U.S. counties, institutional investors own between 5 and 10% of the housing stock. These counties are concentrated in metro areas like Dallas, Houston, Atlanta, Phoenix, etc. In comparison, mom and pop landlords own about 20% of single-family homes. So my point is, I'm not even sure how this fits with the whole issue of houses being available. Okay? Now, I know they bought up a lot of houses when they created the housing crisis in 2008 and prices were down. They bought up a bunch of them. And then Trump made a great point when he's talking about this, that they can depreciate the losses. And you can't. If you're a homeowner, if your home goes out of value, you can't depreciate it. Big banks can. So it'll be interesting to see how this affects the housing market. I'd like to see more, analysis of that. Okay. But from a public relations standpoint, I think you're for it. I think most Americans are like, yes, this is wrong. Don't let them just go buy up all the housing. And again, I have people telling me Trump never does anything for the little people. He's just in it for himself. Well, he ain't getting anything out of this, kids. He's doing this for you, for your kids, for people who can't afford it. So, just take that with, for what it really is. Okay? Then, this is something that we really want to see, and I'll tell you a lot. GOP advances ban on congressional stock trading without a single Democrat voting for it. Right? Okay? Oh, Nancy Pelosi. She's better at buying stocks than Warren Buffett was, right? Made hundreds of millions of dollars. Oh, but that's okay because she's a member of Congress, right? She can do what you can't do. Yeah, right? So they passed this bill. Representative Brian Stile of Wisconsin advanced his Stop Insider Trading Act out of the House Administrative Committee without support from a single Democrat, clearing the way for consideration by the full House. The proposal would prohibit members of Congress from purchasing individual stocks and require lawmakers to give 7 to 14 days notice before selling securities. Investments in index and mutual funds would still be allowed, as would the investments of dividends that previously owned assets. Okay, reinvestment of dividends. So when you own a mutual fund or an index fund, you're basically, you're just following the market. There's no advantage to you. Inside information wouldn't help you. So they're saying that should be okay, and reinvestment of whatever you make on that back into the fund is okay because it's not insider trading. Democrats claim the bill fails to fully address the conflicts of interest arising from lawmakers trading stocks. What's their point? What's this about? During the 2-hour markup session, Representative Joe Morrell, Democrat from New York, proposed requiring Congress and President Trump and Vice President Vance to fully divest from individual securities. Okay? They're just doing this because they want to hurt Donald Trump. They voted, not one voted for it, even though they know it's wrong as rain, even they know every voter is against insider trading by members of Congress. They all voted for it, against this bill, because they don't care. Okay? It's just, send that to your Democrat friends and say, hey, how do you feel about that? Again, ask the question. Don't lecture them. Hey, see this story? Why would Democrats not want to end insider trading? See what they say. This is, I think, a very important story. I just found it this morning before I came on, very early this morning, and I think it's true, and I think it tells you a lot about what's about to happen. Up to 25% of U.S. colleges may close soon, Brandeis president warns. Higher education is approaching a period of profound disruption, and many colleges may not survive, Arthur Levin, the newly appointed president of Brandeis University, said during a recent event. Levine estimates that between 20 and 25% of colleges will close in the coming years, while community colleges and regional universities move increasingly online. Gonna happen. Wealthier institutions may have the resources to withstand the transition, and many others will not. Levin said that elite schools such as Harvard can afford to wait out disruptions, while smaller institutions face immediate pressure to adapt. They're not going to wait out this disruption. The AI is going to just take over education. It's going to take it over. What Harvard and those guys are going to do is they're going to use their dumb donors' money and unfortunately too much of our taxpayer dollars to not change at all, and just continue to be indoctrination centers and continue to fight against Western civilization because they're ideological idiots, okay? So, okay, if you donate to them, so what? If you're stupid enough to do that. Higher education is undergoing a transformation. Our whole society is undergoing a transformation, Levin said, pointing to the shift from a national industrial economy to a global digital knowledge-based one. You're a fool. We're not shifting to a global digital knowledge economy. President Trump spent the whole time in Davos saying it's about nationalism. It's about you making your country strong in your country. They still don't get it. This president is doing the report about why they're going to close, is wrong about why they're going to close. The shift, he said, is driving demographic, economic, technological, and political changes that universities have been slow to address. Outcomes better be worth the price paid, he said, which is why they're not going to survive. Because no kid can justify going to college to learn things they don't need. You got to focus on what your passion is and use the internet and AI to learn those things. And I'm watching these podcasts, like the Moonshots podcast, I tell you all to watch, where the guy from MIT says all their best students are leaving because things are happening where they can start a company using AI and make lots of money, and they don't need a college degree. That's MIT saying that, okay? The initiative seeks to overhaul the university's general education curriculum, expand access to internships and apprenticeships, and provide students with micro-credentials tied to skills valued by employers. He says, the liberal arts have always been practical, he said, noting that early American education was designed to prepare students for professional and civic leadership. Under the new plan, Brandeis aims to redesign general education to better align with the demands of global digital economy. A key component of the proposal is a shift towards competency-based education that measures students' skills and knowledge instead of relying solely on grades that meant nothing, in classes that meant nothing, by teachers teaching things that meant nothing. Okay? He's wrong. I had a liberal arts education. Before they went woke, I grew up in the Christian, I went to Catholic grade school, Catholic high school, a Catholic college, Gannon University in Erie, Pennsylvania. There were Jesuits. We had a liberal education. You know what that meant? It taught us how to think. It didn't teach us what they want us to know. It wasn't about learn this that we teach you like it is now, right? Learn that boys can be pregnant, men can be pregnant, right? They didn't teach that. They taught me how to think. What did that mean? Read the great books. Do my own research, right? Become a person who can go into any environment and figure out what's wrong and how to make it right. They're not liberal arts colleges anymore. They're indoctrination centers. And if they don't wake up and figure out that maybe we ought to teach people how to think, everybody's going to be going to Jordan Peterson's digital academy where you can get a real education for a whole lot less. And so if there's a college near you, look for it to become an Amazon warehouse in the near future, because that's what's going to happen to it, or an AI data center. That would be interesting. That'd be the best of all. Yeah, education gets destroyed by the system that destroyed it literally physically. Very cool. Okay. This, again, I said I'd mention it at the end of the show, and here it is. TikTok has finally been sold, ending a campaign that spanned over half a decade. And I'm just trying to figure out, does it even matter? It took so long, does it matter? So here's the story. TikTok announces that its Chinese owner, ByteDance, has sold a majority stake in its U.S. operations to a group of non-Chinese investors. This marks the end of a prolonged legal battle that saw the app banned by Congress and drawn into international politics. The news comes after years of original reporting by the National Pulse on this subject. The new ownership structure includes Oracle, MGX, Silver Lake, and Michael Dell's personal investment entity, among others. These investors will hold over 80% of the stock in the new company, aiming to reduce TikTok's connections to China and alleviate national security concerns, which is the big question. Because the algorithm still looks like it's going to be run by the Chinese, which means that they will feed information to TikTok users that is anti-U.S., anti-Trump, and pro-China. The deal finalized after over a year of negotiations addresses critical questions about TikTok's presence in the American market. Without this separation from ByteDance, TikTok faced the possibility of being thrown out of the U.S. market entirely. Since 2019, various U.S. entities, including universities, military branches, and both Trump and Biden administrations, attempted to restrict TikTok's operations. Okay, until Donald Trump was on TikTok and did really well and said, I need TikTok to win elections. And so Congress said, you got to get out of the country. Trump said, hold on, let me do a deal. And he got his buddy Larry Ellison and these guys to put up billions of dollars, and now TikTok's going to be back. Now, I've told you, we were on TikTok for a microsecond. We had a video that we put out, like a little 3-minute video about something. 60,000 people saw it. Yeah? But I kept putting little videos out, like the stories in today's podcast about China, and I was thrown off. And then I went back under another name and did some things about China, and I was thrown off. Pretty sure that the China stuff is what got me thrown off. So when it gets taken over by Americans, will they restore me? Yeah, we'll have to ask that question. We'll see what happens, all right? Who knows? Who knows? So I've got 2 more stories and we'll wrap up the podcast. This one I want to go into a little depth with so we can understand it, because Kash Patel and Dan Bongino have talked about how crime is way down, historically down. And this story comes out and says murder plummeted more than 20% in the U.S. last year, the largest drop in record. And then the story goes on to say the lowest murder rate per capita since 1900, 125 years ago. Well, that kind of got my attention, and I thought I'd do a little research for you. Murders plummeted for more than 20% in 2025 from the year before, the single largest one-year drop on record, and it might be the lowest murder rate in the U.S. since 1900, a study released Thursday by the Council of Criminal Justice found. So I went to the study, okay? I went to the study, okay? Crime trends in U.S. cities, all right? And in the study, they had key takeaways, all right? Looking at changes in violent offenses, the rate of reported homicides was 21% lower in 2025 than in 2024 in the 35 cities providing data for that crime, representing 922 fewer homicides in 35 cities. That's a lot. There were 9% fewer reported aggravated assaults, 22 fewer gun assaults, and 22 fewer domestic violence incidents, 2% less of domestic violence incidents last year than in 2024. Robbery fell by 23%, while carjacking decreased by 43%. Those are great numbers, okay? That's law and order. That's what we want. Safe America, right? When data for jurisdictions of all sizes are reported by the FBI later this year, there's a strong possibility that homicides in 2025 will drop to about 4 per 100,000 residents. So 4 murders for every 100,000 people. That would be the lowest rate ever recorded in law enforcement or public health data going back to 1900 and mark the largest single-year percentage drop in homicide rate on record. So I said, what is that? I used an AI and said, okay, if there's 4 deaths per 100,000, there's 330 million people in the United States, how many is that? 13,720 deaths. Now, that's not great, but that's not bad. And so I said, well, where does that now rank? If murder is 13,720 people, where does that rate according to deaths in the U.S.? Okay? And as you can imagine, heart disease, for those of you listening, I'm showing this on the screen, heart disease kills 680,000 Americans. Cancer, 613,000. Accidents like car crashes, 223,000. Strokes, 163,000. COVID kills 50,000. And murders is only 13,720. Suicides are 48,000. Suicide is 4 times more deadly than murder. And geez, if that's the case, why do we need all these gun laws? How are guns such a threat? Maybe we ought to start asking that question. Maybe we ought to start asking the question, why do we spend all this money on law enforcement? How much are we spending? I should have done that reason. I just thought of this question. Maybe when you guys could take an AI. So I just told you that it's 0.4%, 4 deaths per 100,000, and that's 13,720 deaths. How much did we spend on law enforcement in the United States? And when it was higher than that, say in 2020, 25 years ago, how much did we spend? What's that trend line? That'd be a real good question to know, wouldn't it? I'll look at it, you looking at it, write to me at info@wethepeopleconvention.org and let me know what you find out, because I think that something's wrong here. I think maybe we're misallocating funds. I'd like to look at fire departments too, and with all these new zoning, these codes for building houses and making houses more, preventing electrical fires and things. How many house fires do we have, and how much does fire departments cost us? Yeah, no one asks those questions, do they? In your lifetime, did you ever ask those questions? Does anybody ask that question? Does the mayor or your township trustees or anyone ask that question? No, they don't. You know why? Because they love getting the money and they don't want to give any of it back, and it's your money and they don't care how they spend it. There it is. Only Donald Trump and patriots like us ask these questions. So I'm going to leave the podcast with a really important story, because many of us have been for this forever. At Davos, President Trump announced the United States completes its withdrawal from the World Health Organization. We are done. Finally, we are out of this communist-controlled, absolutely anti-U.S., anti-health organization, the World Health Organization. What a scam. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the U.S. Department of State today announced on January 22nd the United States' completion of its withdrawal from the World Health Organization due to the organization's mishandling of the COVID-19 pandemic that arose out of Wuhan, China, its failure to adopt urgently needed reforms, and its inability to demonstrate independence from the inappropriate political influence of WHO member states. President Trump, on a year ago, January 20th of last year, 2025, announced the U.S. plan to leave the WHO. During the year-long process, the U.S. stopped funding the World Health Organization, withdrew all personnel, and began pivoting activities previously conducted by the WHO to direct bilateral engagements with other countries and organizations. With the exit from the WHO, the U.S. will be coordinating with the WHO solely in a limited fashion to effectuate withdrawal. This is good news, because remember, during COVID, when the Chinese unleashed a bioweapon, but the Chinese controlled the WHO, they defended China. They wouldn't call them out at all. They just lied. And millions of people globally died. These people we shouldn't just withdraw. We should try all of them in international courts. These are murderers. These are people, corrupt political people who took bribes. But then again, we can't even hold accountable the people in our country who did the same thing, like Anthony Fauci and all the guys in the CDC, right? All the guys who kept telling us that, oh, the vaccine works. By the way, on our X feed, go look at the head of the CDC's little video on my Tom Z WTPC at X.com, where he says, oh, COVID was never intended to be a vaccine. It doesn't prevent COVID. Yeah, except you changed the definition of a vaccine on the government databases so you could call it and lie to us about it being a vaccine. How come they haven't been put on trial? How come none of the people who profited, who funded the COVID pandemic, who unleashed it, haven't been on trial? So maybe I'm overstepping my bounds by saying we should charge those WHO people when we can't even charge the people in our own country, right? That's what we got to fix, kids. That's what we got to do. All right. So I'm going to wrap up today's show. As always, we're going to remember our friend Charlie Kirk, and we're going to continue to fight to fulfill his mission by completing America's spiritual revival, because this is a fight of good versus evil. This isn't a fight against Republicans and Democrats, even left versus right. Those words mean nothing. This is good versus evil. Evil people release pandemics that kill millions of people for money. That's who we're fighting. Evil people flood your country and all of Europe with millions of people who they don't even want to assimilate and cannot assimilate, to destabilize your government and basically overthrow your country. Those are evil people. That's who we're fighting. It's a fight of good and evil, and we're going to win it. And this year is the pivotal year, and you've got to be geared up to do it. So as we close our podcast, I will remind you, yes, we love your donations. Yes, we need you to act on the things I've asked you to do. Call your senator and say, don't pass this budget without cuts, right? Share the J.D. Vance video about the 5-year-old child being arrested by ICE lie. And then tell other people about this podcast. And, that's the more people who watch it, the more people will be informed. So spread the word. And then write to me at info@wethepeopleconvention.org about ideas, questions. Was there a story I didn't cover that you thought was important? There were some things that almost made the list but didn't. Okay? Tell me about that. We're here to serve you. It's your podcast. We just produce it and deliver it. It's for you to do what? Protect and defend your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. Use the chapters player on our podcast page. So on our podcast page at wethepeopleconvention.org, you go there, on the front page of We the People Convention, go to the podcast page. Every story is linked with the time of the story. And if you click on that link, it'll go either to the actual news story or the video related to that. Our chapters player allows you to scroll through the whole podcast and stop and go, oh, what's that story? I didn't know about Denmark's sterilization program. Click, and it goes right to that part of the video and starts playing it. And you can get a link of that you can then write right there and send it to someone via an email. Did you know about this Danish thing where they were sterilizing women for 30 years to control the population without their knowledge? That's a tool. The whole website is a tool for you, okay? And then at the end of the stories, it lists this week's action items. If you care about America, if you care about yourself, if you just simply selfishly care about your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity, every week you will go to the podcast page, you will see our action items, and you will do them. And you will get other people to do them as well. And that's how we win. That's how we control the narrative, right? That's how we protect and defend our great country. That's what we're about. That's what 2026 is all about. So I thank you for coming and spending your time with us. I thank you for the people who watch the clips I put on YouTube and on Instagram and on Facebook. I appreciate all of that. Of people who follow us on X. Interacting is important, but I hope you find this is a place where you come for truth and really for advice on how to act, what to do this week. So we appreciate every one of you. We hope you will. We are praying, and every one of you say a prayer that this ice storm does not do the kind of damage it potentially can do. That's the key thing. We'll deal with the cold. We'll do it. So, oh, by the way, we're up to 1 degree since the podcast started. It's 1 degree, okay? I know it's cold where you are. I know we're going to get snow on Sunday. But pray about those ice storms and take care of each other, okay? That's what Americans do. Don't just and prepare for yourself, but take care of your neighbor. Take care of your relatives. We've been calling and texting our relatives everywhere over the country because we care about each other. And that's why we're going to celebrate our 250th anniversary, right? Together, because it's our country and we're proud of it. All right. We're going to sign off for now. May God bless you and may God continue to bless the United States of America. You've been listening to the We the People Convention weekly news and opinion podcast, and my name is Tom Zawistowski. We'll see you next week, God willing.
Can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight